If you walked into any Sunday school in America and showed a child a picture of Adam, Eve, and the serpent, and asked, "Who is the snake?" they would answer without hesitation, "That's the devil, that's Satan, that's Lucifer." It is the most widely accepted fact in Western Christianity. The story goes that Lucifer, the fallen angel, possessed the body of a snake, snuck into the Garden of Eden, and tricked humanity into eating the forbidden fruit. This act introduced sin into the world. But here is the problem. If you actually open the book of Genesis and read the story and, I mean really read it, without the lens of thousands of years of tradition, you will find something shocking. The word Satan does not appear in the text. The word Lucifer does not appear. The word devil does not appear. There is no mention of a fallen angel. There is no mention of possession. There is no mention of a war in heaven. The text simply says, "Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made." According to the author of Genesis, the creature in the tree was just that, an animal, a wild beast. So, if the Bible doesn't say it was Satan, who or what was it? Was it a talking animal from a fable? Was it a symbol of a rival pagan god? Or was it something much stranger, luminous, divine being that we have completely mistranslated for centuries? Today, we are going to reopen the cold case of original sin. We are going to peel back the layers of history, linguistics, and ancient Near Eastern mythology to answer the question, if the serpent wasn't the devil, then what was it? To understand what is happening in Eden, we first have to look at the Hebrew word used for this creature. The word is nakash. In standard Hebrew, nakash means snake or serpent, but the description Genesis gives us is very specific. It introduces the nakash as one of the wild animals the Lord God had made. The text emphasizes its creatureliness. It is a biological entity created by Yahweh, living in the garden alongside the cattle and the birds. If you read the story as it was originally written, likely between the 10th and 6th centuries BC, it reads like a just so story. These are ancient folk tales that explain why nature looks the way it does. Why do zebras have stripes? Why does the leopard have spots? Why do snakes crawl on their bellies? The climax of the Genesis story is the curse. God says to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life." This punishment implies that before this moment, the snake did not crawl on its belly. It had legs. It walked upright. To an ancient Israelite audience, this story wasn't about a cosmic war with demons. It was an etiologian origin story explaining why snakes are scary, legless, and bite people's heels. If the serpent was Satan, the punishment makes no sense. Does Satan crawl on his belly? Does Satan eat physical dust? No, but snakes do. So, on the most literal level, the author of Genesis wants you to believe this was a clever, talking animal. But why a snake? Why not a lion or a bear? This brings us to the second possibility. The serpent was a rival god. When the Israelites were writing Genesis, they weren't living in a vacuum. They were surrounded by Canaanites, Egyptians, and Babylonians. And in almost all of those cultures, the snake was not a symbol of evil. It was a symbol of life, wisdom, and fertility. In Egypt, the cobra Urias sat on the pharaoh's crown to protect him. In Canaan, the mother goddess Asherah was often depicted with snakes. In Mesopotamia, the god Ningishida was a serpent god of the underworld and fertility. Notice what the serpent offers Eve. He doesn't offer her riches or power. He offers her wisdom gnosis. He says, "Your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And here is the uncomfortable truth. The serpent didn't lie. God said, if you eat it, you will die that day. They ate it, and they didn't die that day. They lived for hundreds of years. But the serpent said, your eyes will be opened. And verse 7 says, then the eyes of both of them were opened. Later, God himself admits, in verse 22, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. The serpent told the truth. Some scholars argue that the Nakash represents the cult of the mother goddess. The story is a polemic. It is the Yahwist priests attacking the local fertility religions. They are saying, you think the snake brings wisdom and life? No, we are going to tell you a story where the snake brings death and exile. It was political propaganda designed to turn the people away from pagan symbolism. But there is a third theory. A theory that is much stranger, but linguistically fascinating. What if the Nakash wasn't a snake at all? In Hebrew, roots often have multiple meanings. The noun Nakash means snake, but the verb Nakash means to divining or to practice sorcery, and the related noun Nakoshat means bronze or shiny metal. So, you have a word that can mean snake, diviner, and shiny bronze thing. Now, let's look at the other beings that hang out in God's throne room. In Isaiah 6, we meet the seraphim. As we discussed in a previous video, the word seraph means burning one or fiery serpent in the desert. When God sends fiery serpents to bite the Israelites, the word used is seraphim. When Moses builds a bronze snake on a pole to heal them, it is a seraph made of Nakoshet. So, in the ancient Hebrew mind, there is a blurry line between serpent and divine guardian being. Some scholars, like Dr. Michael Heiser, argue that the creature in Eden wasn't a literal zoological snake. It was a divine being, a member of the divine council who rebelled. Because he was a seraph, a fiery serpentine being, the text calls him a Nakash. He was a shiny one, a luminous being. This explains why Eve wasn't afraid. If a rattlesnake started talking to you, you would run. But if a glowing, divine guardian stood next to the tree of life and offered you wisdom, you might listen. He wasn't an intruder, he was an insider. He was a guardian of the throne who went rogue. This interpretation bridges the gap. It keeps the serpentine description, but elevates the character to a spiritual antagonist. So, if Genesis calls it a beast, or a symbol, or a ref, when did it become Satan? We have to look at the timeline. Genesis was written roughly between 1000 BC and 600 BC at this time. The concept of the devil, a singular, cosmic enemy of God, did not exist in Jewish theology. In the Old Testament, Satan is a job title. It means the accuser. He works for God, like in the book of Job. He isn't a rebel leader. The idea of a cosmic bad guy only developed much later, after the Jews returned from exile in Persia around 500 BC. They were exposed to Zoroastrianism, a religion that had a clear good God and a clear bad God. Slowly, Jewish thinkers started looking for a bad God in their own texts. They needed a backstory for evil. The first time we see the serpent explicitly identified as the devil is in a book called The Wisdom of Solomon. This is a non-canonical book written around 100 BC, hundreds of years after Genesis. It says, through the devil's envy, death entered the world. This was a retcon, retroactive continuity. Later, theologians looked back at the Garden of Eden and said, aha, that snake must have been the devil in disguise. They projected their new theology onto an ancient story. This reinterpretation was sealed by the Book of Revelation. Written around 90 AD, Revelation 12-9 speaks of that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. By the time of the New Testament, the transformation was complete. The clever, legless beast of Genesis had been fully morphed into the cosmic dragon of the Apocalypse. Finally, in the 17th century, John Milton wrote Paradise Lost. Milton gave us the cinematic version we all know today. He describes Satan finding a sleeping snake, entering its mouth, and using its vocal cords to speak to Eve. Most of what modern Christians believe about the Garden of Eden comes from Milton, not Moses. So, what was the serpent? Historically, to the author of Genesis, it was a trickster creature. It was a representation of the chaotic, dangerous wisdom of the wild. It was a foil to human innocence. It explained why the world is broken and why humans are afraid of snakes. Theologically, it was a test. Ancient temples were always guarded. You had to pass a test to enter the presence of the gods. The serpent was the guardian of the tree. Adam and Eve failed the test. They tried to seize wisdom on their own terms rather than receiving it from God. When we turn the serpent into Satan, we certainly make the story more epic. We turn it into a Star Wars battle between good and evil. But we also lose something. We lose the human element. If Eve was tricked by a supernatural supergenius with cosmic powers, she is a victim. But if she was tricked by a clever animal who simply asked a question, did God really say? Then the failure is truly hers. The story of Genesis isn't about a war in heaven. It is about the war in the human heart. It is about the temptation to define good and evil for ourselves. And to learn that lesson, you don't need a devil, you just need a mirror. Thanks for watching.